Welcome back to Outriders. In this video I'm going to be reviewing the Worldslayer expansion and letting you know my thoughts on it, because I've played a little bit more of the game now. I'm not too far into the expansion with like the apocalypse tiers and things like that, but I've completed the campaign, I've played the end game, and that is pretty much all there is to it. You have a campaign, it lasts about 3.5 hours, and then you have the trial of Tarya Gratar. That trial, they did the one thing I said was going to be a really bad idea. They kept it static. That trial never ever changes. It's always the same path, always the same route, nothing changes whatsoever. So in the expansion, and if the gameplay's worth the money, all that sort of stuff, I'm going to say no. It's good, it's enjoyable, don't get me wrong. There's not too many bugs or anything like that. There's a couple of like wrongly balanced items and stuff, if you want to say that. Basically, the Devastator, you put an anomaly power build together and you can blitz through absolutely anything. But when it comes to the gameplay itself, the campaign, very short, boring, not a lot to it at all. They've barely added new enemies. It's all, like, you get through it, the scenery looks nice and things like that. But it's just like, oh, I've done it all before. There's not a lot to the campaign whatsoever. And then you get to the trial. It was fun to run it the first time. I did see a big problem. I don't think a lot of people are going to find this a problem or see it as a problem, but I don't like the amount of loot it chucks out. And I know they're doing balancing changes. They're going to increase how much, like, how many legendaries drop and things like that. But for me to go in there and play it my first ever time, it lasts a long time as well. It took me and the randomly match-made team about an hour and 20 minutes to complete it. And the amount of loot they were chucking at us, especially if you can't communicate, it was like, oh, every now and then when I find the perfect time, I've got to rush into my inventory, delete stuff that I don't need to use or I don't want or anything like that, and I've just got to carry on. And I had to do that several times in order to get through the trial, because otherwise the stuff goes to your stash, and my stash is almost full. So it got frustrating with the amount of loot that was dropping. It was just as though they dropped an abundance of loot, but there was no meaning to it. There was absolutely no meaning. It was all just like, oh, there's a couple of apocalypse items here and there. Other than that, it's just like purples drop in and there's lots and lots of them. So that wasn't the greatest experience. The trial itself is fun, but it's not going to last long in terms of it being fun because it's the same thing over and over again. They are still working on adding features that I believe should have come into the game with the expansion, like locking your gear so that you can't accidentally dismantle it. But for some reason, all that stuff is still being worked on. They've done a little bug fix or whatever you want to call it, a tiny little patch they released recently, and they're going to be doing balancing and stuff. So the future of it does look good, but like from the launch of the expansion, it wasn't fun. Because you was waiting hours to get in, then you'd do the campaign, then you jump into the end game, and apart from that, you just have a grind to just improve your apocalypse level and things like that, like get your points for your packs tree, your ascension tree, and other than the grind, there's no new expeditions. You just have the new trial endgame mode. That is everything that come into the endgame. And not only that, there are still the matchmaking issues involved. I'm still getting, like, couldn't successfully join a team. There's people, you go in and they're just standing still, like in the Outriders camp or wherever they are. You go in and then the host leaves. The connection isn't too bad. It seems to be joining and actually getting into the game modes themselves that seems to be a little bit irritating. Other than that, it doesn't seem to be working too bad. Like, there's not too much bad to it. It just seems to be the joining up. So yeah, in my opinion, the upgrade to the expansion isn't really worth it. If you absolutely love Outriders, there's not a lot of bad to it, it's just that it's not that fun. And they're charging a lot of money for this expansion. If I remember correctly, I paid like £30 for it. And then I had to wait, I think it was almost an entire day to actually log on to the servers so that I could play through the campaign. It wasn't even to play online stuff. They did, however, and I have to give credit to them, they sorted the issues out with everybody connecting a lot faster than they did at the launch of the base game. But yeah, you jump in, play the campaign, you go through to the trial, you run that a couple of times, you're bored, so you go do expeditions, you're bored. There's still not a lot to it. I don't think the expansion's worth like £30-35 or whatever you're paying. I think maybe a £20 expansion or more content to be involved, like the lock feature for your gear, that should have been in there when the expansion come out. And that's even still too long, in my opinion. They should have had the lock feature in for a looter shooter at the launch of the base game. So yeah, fun if you're interested. Not a lot to the expansion, and that fun will kind of veer off quite fast, purely because there's so much grind to it, and the only new thing in there for your gear is apocalypse items, where you're going to have an extra mod. Not only that, your level goes up, so you basically deal more damage, but at the same time as you're dealing more damage and that's seeming cool, the enemies are tougher and they deal more damage too. But that's going to do it for my little review of Outriders Worldslayer. I picked it up, I've enjoyed it, but I don't think I'll be playing it too much more, purely because I'm not finding it that interesting personally, because I've done all the expeditions before. The campaign, as I said, was short and boring, and the end game is static. If they can make it dynamic, or add more to it, perfect. But right now, where it stands, not that fun. Obviously, unless you are really, really interested in the game. And I think a lot of people are going to agree with me, because they started off when the expansion launched with about 14,000 players or something like that. And now they're not even passing 6,000 players concurrently on Steam. Obviously there's other people playing on console and everything else like that, but for Steam they hit about 13 and 14,000 players when it launched, and already, like a couple of weeks later, they are back down to less than actually 5,500 players concurrently, even at the weekend. But what we're going to do is leave that video there. Let me know your thoughts and stuff in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed it.